What's up, everyone? Thomas here with For Real, and today I am talking with Mukunda Michael Dewil, writer and director of the new thriller film Collide. And I am excited to talk with him about this movie because it is quite the roller coaster ride through an evening, and we're going to talk about it in as spoiler-free of a manner as possible because there are some twists and turns in this film. So, with that said, Mukunda, it is a pleasure to talk with you today. Welcome to For Real.
Thank you, Thomas. Happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Let's actually start with an icebreaker. So Collide takes place over the course of an evening, like I said, primarily in one location. So what's one of your favorite one location films? Actually, now that I think about it, you've made one, but besides that, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Any other one location films that have stood out to you?
I liked Phone Booth. I
Phone
thought that was,
Booth.
yeah, really. I actually I liked it so much. I wrote my own phone booth, but it's on a park bench because I really thought that it's not easy to do a single location. You really have to, stuff has to go on. People get bored pretty quickly these days. So I was impressed how Phone Booth really managed to do such a strong job on that. So that would probably be my best. The script for Buried, Chris
Mm-hmm.
Sparling, I know him, we're friends. It was very tight as well. That's a really good script.
Those are two movies that are always top of mind for me when I think about one location films. I literally go to Phone Booth and Buried. I actually have it on the record. I was on a podcast talking about single location films, I think, and those are the two that I had to mention. So yeah, great go-tos. I probably would have said the same thing. But let's talk really briefly about your one location film besides Collide, which is the Immaculate Room, because you just mentioned how difficult it is to write a movie like that. Can you talk a little bit about that process of writing this like literally one room film?
Yeah. You mean the Immaculate Room?
Immaculate Room, yeah.
Yeah, so that was tricky because that literally is one room. But
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting because it turned out like we did so many things to make you feel that there was more to that world than a single room. And it actually turned out, and frankly, you never really know. But there's a lot of things like there's lighting things I changed. There's like morning light, there's evening light, there's dawn light. I kind of had a projector. There's a scene where they project a huge projector onto a wall. And then we moved around. The room had space. It's a very big room and it had space. Because, the whole thing with a single location or with actually any stories, you're trying to be entertaining. You just have to entertain and no one really cares. So if you can do that, you can because there's so many movies where they have 100 locations and it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really what elements can you use to keep some, tension going? Because people have a very low threshold for boredom. And it's funny because the movie that we're going to talk about now, Collide, it's actually 3 movies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's put into one. That's what you have to do these days to keep people's attention. You're competing with TikTok, and like, we had low attention span before. Now we have even less. So there's almost just no room for boredom these days. People are just done. They're moving on. So you have to find a way but it's tricky because you have to tell compelling. I always say, see, people come for the action or they come for the thriller, but they stay for the human drama because at the end of the day, people want connection. They want to be touched in the heart. They want meaningful things. But our exterior, we're so we just want the quick fix.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can, and you'll see if you do a movie of just explosions and quick fix, people won't be satisfied. They'll be satisfied in the short term, but not the long term. So it's how do you build up how do you build a character? How do you build a premise? How do you add the nuance and the detail and the layers without boring people? So that's very, very difficult to do, but you have to do it for story, but you also can't get boring because people are just going to leave. So that's kind of a real difficult thing to do. And in Collide, which I think really helps, so it's 3 movies in one is going to be more interesting.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that. Can you like give a brief synopsis on Collide and just kind of give people an
Sure.
idea of what this movie's
Yeah.
about?
So it's these 3 interlocking stories that all take place around a night in a Los Angeles restaurant. And the one story is there's this busboy who found a whole bunch of cocaine washed up on the beach, and he's storing it in the walk-in freezers, and he's trying to sell it to this drug dealer that he doesn't know, and they're going to pick it up that night, and he's got to like finish his shift and then go and handle off the coke, and then him and his waitress girlfriend are going to leave. They're going to leave LA because they're just done with this stuff. So that's the one story. And there's a ticking clock because the guy's coming at 7. He's a very heavy dealer. They don't know this world. They're afraid. There's a lot of kind of anxiousness there. Mm-hmm. Then the second thread is that there's a guy parked across the street, and he phones his wife to ask her when she'll be home. And she says, I told you I'm working. Stop bothering me. I'll be home later. And then you see actually she's in the restaurant on that call, and you see the manager come over and give her a kiss, and they're having an affair. So that's the second story. And then the third story is that this guy's on a blind date and it's not going very well, and he wants to leave, and the woman says, no, stay. And he says, no, look, this ain't working, let's just go. And she says, if you get up, well, she says, put your hand under the chair. And he does, and he feels something. She says, that's a weight sensitive explosive. And if you get up off the chair, it's going to explode. And so she's come for some retribution in his past. So just one of those stories is intense.
That's that's so true. I think that there's a lot of tension with all of these stories, and when you bring them together into this one location, it's just this boiling pot of drama and suspense and action that you really are trying to spend a lot of time figuring out how this is all going to play out. So I appreciated that about this film. There's definitely a lot of suspense, and that thriller nature of the film is so prominent, and I like that.
Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, because as I was saying about that tension, you have to keep the tension up.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do it cheaply. It has to be baked into the story. And that's the thing. It for me, it always just comes back to the story. Like, really, no matter how good the actors are, or how good the director is, unless there's a compelling story that you're working off, it's really hard to artificially crank up suspense and tension. Mm-hmm. So when you have these 3 stories like this, what's in its favor, these kind of multi stories, mm-hmm. is that you can choose the juicy bits, and then once you're done, you can just leave and go to the next story.
Right.
So that it's one of the benefits of actually telling a multi-story like this. You can just keep the pace. You can start at like 7. You mm-hmm. can just keep going because you don't have to do a lot of, because people do also have there's a shorthand, and people are so literate these days with the media. Mm-hmm. People fill in a lot. So you don't need to show a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And because of that, you can start your scenes later and you can get out earlier. You can start your whole story later and you can get out earlier, because people are filling it in. Mm-hmm. And I think my whole thing with that is that you can do all of these things, but if you also bolster it with human emotion and the human condition, that combination is very, very powerful, I find.
Absolutely.
Too much drama and people get bored, although they make sense to them, and too much empty thriller and empty action just is not sustainable. So if you can get that balance right, I think you have a good piece of, good story.
I really appreciate that you mentioned about that balance, because there are a lot of films that are just so action oriented that they forget that these are, people that we're supposed to care about. And I don't know, maybe I think that there's an audience for like the turn your brain off kind of action type movies, but I think, and then of course there's the dramas, and I think that there's like the super dramas, the really dry kind of movies, and there's a niche audience for that as well. But when you find that happy medium between the two, having the action and the thriller and suspense with characters that you care about, that really culminates to making a good theatrical experience. which kind of leads me to my next question, which is what inspiration or what inspired the three stories that you ended up settling on for this movie? Yeah, I would like, where was there any influence on like how you chose which characters were going to embody what backgrounds and what narratives?
Yeah. So the washed up cocaine on the beach, I always had that as an idea of a movie. Because I just thought like it's something that's going to change someone's life instantly. And particularly if you decide to keep it and try and sell it. that you just know is not going to end well. So
Mm-hmm.
that I always had. And then, so my wife co-wrote the script for me, and
Very
she's
cool.
mixed race, and we both come from South Africa, and we've experienced like the horrors of apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted to tell like a nuanced story about race and retribution and forgiveness and the complexities of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was super interesting, and to do it under the context of like a ticking bomb, like people need to grow quickly and come clean or stuff's going to happen. I mean, that was strong, and it had a strong like emotional element to it, which I really thought was good. And then socially, it's you know I like really don't care about, put it this way, I care about things that have meaning. Like I'm not inspired to write things or to work with a writer about something that doesn't actually have some philosophical meaning. I'm just like that by nature. Like I can't, I often just walk out of movies at the third act because I kind of know where it's all going and there's nothing interesting or new being told here. So that kind of a story that she wanted to tell and we told together was, I thought, interesting, and I really thought it was done in an original way. It wasn't just, you know, excuse the cliche, but like black and white. There was a lot of gray in that. And then the third thread, I just liked the idea of a very kind but sad person who eventually has to go, actually, I'm not going to take any shit anymore. And that, so these are complex, it's not obvious things. And I just like that growth that everybody has to go through. And then when we, we won't say the end, but I felt that everyone managed to grow in some way, or there was some like, concluding kind of element to this, which I thought, that's why I thought the movie worked. There were compelling stories and somehow we managed to end it, which people thought, okay, this is, okay, people like stayed for the ride, and hopefully they were rewarded with an intelligent ending, hopefully.
You're hitting on like all of the points that make movies worthwhile for me, when you're talking about nuance in narrative. I think that it could be very easy to write narratives, and maybe I shouldn't say that, I haven't written a movie yet, but I imagine it's easier to write a script where it follows the standard, kind of predictable cliche type narratives. But when you add nuance, when you add context and perspective, I love when a movie can include that to make you really think about this situation that sometimes in mainstream is very black and white, but when you actually get to know the person or know the people in the situation, it's gray. It's a lot more complicated
Yeah.
than like than it might seem, which makes the story with Hunter and Tamira super interesting to me. I think they're all very compelling stories, but I think their story is was the one that was most compelling to me, because I think there's a huge conversation that we're trying to have about our past in America. And I mean, your story takes place in South Africa, but we still have that to deal with here when it comes to segregation and racism. Like that's still very prevalent things here, and those themes cross over into our culture. What ultimately do you want people to take away from that conversation, where we're trying to find retribution, we're trying to find uh, a way to like make things right that can't be made right?
Yeah. It's complicated. It's complicated. I mean, you mentioned it though, that in terms of the nuances. So people are human, and humans are frail, and they're prone to mistakes. And what happens a lot is that people are able to maintain like hateful ideologies when they don't see the other person as a person. And if you take those two people and you put them in the room, they will connect on a far more human level. So we did want to show the humanness and the frailties of both her and him, because unless you see, ultimately these things are never going to be solved unless a consciousness is changed. Racism, sexism, crime, everything comes from a person's consciousness. Like they're thinking in a certain way. So unless you change the seed of that, you're always going to have these manifestations of hate, lust, anger, greed, like this. They're just going to pop up. So one of the things is like compassion for people, to see people suffering. When you actually see it, like they say there are no, like if people go to an abattoir, they will become a vegetarian, because to actually see. And so that's what you want to just show with that couple, that they're both suffering. And yes, like healing comes from acknowledging the human, and it's not a theory. There's an acknowledgement of the suffering. And I think that has to get done. It's messy. It's embarrassing. One has to take ownerships for one's role in things. As a white South African male, although I come from, liberal parents who were part of the ANC and, fought against, they were, anti-apartheid, I still have benefited from the privilege of being white. And you have to acknowledge that no matter how much you've done. And this you can't get forgiveness until you're first acknowledging what you need to be forgiven for. So all of this like coming out and this truthfulness. So that in South Africa, they had this Desmond Tutu, Bishop Desmond Tutu, he had what's called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where he gave amnesty for any person who had committed atrocities during apartheid. All they had to do was come before the committee and to admit what they had done and express remorse. And that had tremendous healing, because punishment, yes, but punishment doesn't actually change consciousness that much. But actually the healing, like acknowledging and actually admitting and then asking for forgiveness, can be very transformational. And it's one of the reasons why Mandela and Tutu and a lot of the advanced spiritual Black leaders of South Africa were able to have a peaceful transition, because they handled it so in such an enlightened way. And so, yeah, it's not, I mean, my wife can talk to this more than I can, but I do think it's important to try and tell the humanity behind this all, and to show the humans in the middle of it, because it's not just ideologies and it's not just theories, it's people suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've mentioned social media a couple times, like in terms of entertainment, because I think you're right that we have TikTok shortening our attention spans, but social media also does this thing where it endorses divisiveness on topics like this, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't allow for us to be in the same room and have conversations. It's actually this detachment that we can have from consequences of what we say and think to another person who has to deal with what what people put on the internet. So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to bring up with social media and what you're saying about actually being in the same room, having a conversation as people, and taking the tech or the this mask off that we have on social media. So yeah, and honestly, I could talk with you for a long time about each of these stories in this movie. But that was the one that stood out to me. The other movie that I was thinking about when I was watching this is actually a similarly titled film that came out almost 20 years ago, and that's Crash, which actually stars Ryan Philippe as well. I was interested, just kind of curious, how much maybe that movie may or may not have influenced what you decided to do here.
Well, yeah, the Crash and Magnolia, are these. I really love the interweaving of human stories, and how we're not every action has a reaction, and there's no clean thing. Everything has its consequence and its karmic pattern, and it's all gonna. And I really, so Crash and Magnolia were very strong influences, because I love the way it interweaves like this. Also, it's real humanity going through, it's humans going through really intense things. And I like the catharsis of that. Those were, we were going to change the title because it seemed too close. But 20 years ago, a lot of these kids, they never even watched that. So
I liked the parallel. I mean, it's interesting. That, I mean, they are similarly named and they have that interweaving thing, but also Ryan Philippe is in both of them as well. Race is a big thing, but you're right. Crash came out almost 20 years ago, and I think this is its own movie, right? It's a different tone, different things going on, right?
I think I'm okay with stealing from the best and making my own original. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we'll go ahead and bring this to a close. Are there any last statements or any last things that you want to tell people, or that you want people to get out of this film when they see it?
Yeah, just be kind to everyone. It's tough out there and everyone's hurting. Be kind.
I love it. Well, for those watching, once again, I am speaking with Mukunda Michael Dewil, who is the writer and director of the film Collide, which I believe will be available to see on August 5th. Was that the date?
Yeah, in cinemas
August 5th.
Yeah.
So in cinemas August 5th, and it's a lot of really interesting stories interweaving over the course of an evening, as we've talked about. Certainly worth checking out if you're wanting a bunch of suspense and tension in a film. So Mukunda, thank you so much for joining me on this chat and talking about the film. This was a pleasure for me.
Thank you, Thomas. You have a good day.
Yeah, for everyone out there watching, until next time, keep it for real.